No football team is perfect, and in today's video we're going to be discussing where each championship club can still go ahead and improve this season. I've picked out an interesting stat or two with each championship club, and I'd be interested to get some of your thoughts in the comments down below in terms of where you think your side can still look to improve. If you do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. 300 likes would be massively appreciated. But without any further ado, let's jump in. Starting out with Birmingham, I think it's just a case of them becoming that little bit more clinical. They've scored 7 goals in their first 5 matches, but their XG would suggest they should have slightly more than that. As things stand, they are one of 9 championship clubs who have underperformed their XG so far this season, which tells a story. They're creating chances, they could just be that little bit more clinical in the final third. Birmingham overall have been a really good watch so far, one of 2 championship clubs who are still unbeaten at this point of the season. Still a couple bits they can brush up on. When it comes to Blackburn Rovers, I think it's a case of tightening things up at the back a little bit. Now, they've only conceded 8 goals so far this season, which is by no means disastrous, but we're more so talking about the chances they tend to give away. On average, they concede 17.6 shots per game, which is the most in the league, and if that pattern continues throughout the season, you would expect them to concede a fair few goals. Bristol City could still work on their shot accuracy. As things stand, they're averaging 12.6 shots per game, but only 2.4 of those attempts are actually on target. As things stand, Bristol City have scored 5, conceded 5 in those opening 5 matches, so if they can slightly tip those metrics in their favour, they could be onto a winner, obviously. With that shot accuracy, I'm sure getting the likes of Tommy Conway and Andy Vyman potentially back after this international break will be a big boost in the attacking department. Cardiff could brush up on defending from set-piece situations. As things stand, they've conceded 4 goals from set-piece situations this season. That's the most of any championship club. Definitely an area where Errol Bullock's side will need to improve upon. With Coventry, I think it's the case of finding that link up between Ellis Sims and Haji Wright. Obviously, Matty Godden's been their most prolific player in the championship this season with 3 goals, but I think that long term, these are the 2 forwards who they're going to look to build this team around, obviously. Ellis Sims yet to get off the mark in a Coventry shirt. I think the sooner he scores, the better, really. We've probably seen a little bit more promise from Wright in these opening matches, but as a long-term partnership, I think both of them have got the skill set to work really well off one another. It's just a case of making those 2 profiles mesh together. Huddersfield, they have had a few problems at both ends of the pitch so far. They've only scored 2 goals from open play in their opening 5 matches. I do see that as a bit of cause for concern. Also been fairly susceptible to goals on the counter. Obviously, overall conceding 10 goals so far this season. A few areas both at the back and up top where Huddersfield are going to need to brush up on. Hull City have managed this start to the season really well. Where can they look to improve? They're probably going to need to stop conceding as many chances as they currently are. Hull have conceded an XG of 9.5 in the championship so far this season, which is the highest of any championship club, obviously. They've only conceded 6 goals so far this season, which tells us that Matt Ingram's been on top form. But teams do tend to create quite a few chances against Hull, which is an area they can look to tighten up. With Ipswich, I think it's probably a case of ever so slightly tightening things up at the back as well. Going forward, I've been really impressed with Kieran McKenna's side so far. On the opposite end of the pitch, though, are a few areas where they can look to brush up on. As things stand, they're averaging 5 shots on target against them per game, which is the 4th highest in the league right now. I know that Ipswich have had some very tough matches in those opening 5 games, which will skew the figures ever so slightly, but still an area they can look to improve. With Leeds United, would it be fair to say they could do with finding a little bit of a plan B for those sides who do look to come and sit in against them, really look to frustrate them? We saw when they went really punch for punch with Ipswich how fantastic they could be attacking wise, but that game before the international break against Sheffield Wednesday, where it did end goalless, a few question marks perhaps popped up. Now, Farke has the job to mesh all of these new talents together, both at the back and front end of the pitch. I'm pretty confident that he will get things right eventually. He will strike that balance perfectly, as he has done at Norwich in the past. But just coming up with that plan B and that area to unlock sides who are going to be a little bit more defensive against Leeds, I think could be the solution to some of their problems. With Leicester City, I think they need to start putting some of their games to bed sooner than they have been doing. Obviously, 4 wins from their first 5 matches, you can't really have many complaints about that, but how this Leicester side go on to the next level, I think it does relate to goal scoring and just overall being a little bit more convincing. Of those 4 wins that Leicester have picked up so far, all 4 of them have been by a 1-goal margin, and I think that later down the line in the season, a team with as much attacking quality as this Leicester side does should be looking to kill games off a little bit sooner with that little bit more attacking prowess. Middlesbrough really could do with brushing up at both ends of the pitch. In terms of their finishing, they currently have the lowest conversion rate in the league at just 2.8%. They've also conceded 11 goals so far this season, and Seny Dieng has the worst prevented goals statistic right now. Work definitely needs to be done there in the striker and goalkeeping department. With Millwall, I want to see a little bit more from them in the final third after this international break. Just 4 goals from their opening 5 matches. Of those 4 goals, only 2 of them coming from open play as well. Gary Rowett's sides don't always have the tendency to be the most sort of eye-catching and free scoring, but with the talent Millwall have in the final third, I do think there's more talent to be unlocked there. Norwich City, you probably have to say defensively so they could still look to tighten up, because attacking wise they've been almost flawless so far this season. From a defensive standpoint, they've averaged 15 shots against them per 90, which does put them in the top 8 for having the most shots against them so far this season, albeit quite a few of those numbers will be skewed by that ridiculous 4-4 draw they had with Southampton. From an attacking aspect, I've been really impressed with Plymouth so far this season. Where they can still look to improve is probably to tighten things up at the back. As things stand, they've allowed 17.6 shots against them per game, which is the 2nd highest in the league as things stand. Connor Hazard's been excellent so far and has dug them out on quite a few occasions, but long term where they can look to improve, probably in those defensive areas. From a Preston point of view, it's been an almost flawless start to the season as we currently sit top of the league unbeaten. Where we can still look to improve though, I think it's just been that little bit more creative. I think we've gone along with our game plans excellently so far this season, and hopefully getting players back after this international break should allow us to be that little bit more expressive in the final third. As things stand, we've been averaging an XG of 0.98 per 90, which if it continues over a full season, you would expect our goal scoring to start to slow down a little bit. But I'm hopeful with the return of a few players from injury and new signings coming in after this international break, we should look to bump those numbers up that little bit more. With QPR, I think it's probably that need to improve things ever so slightly in the final third. As things stand, they've only created 3 big chances this season, which is the fewest of any championship club. I think once that side gets a little bit more attacking fluidity, maybe they could bounce onto that next level. With Rotherham, it's fairly similar to Preston. I just think they can look to get into those attacking scenarios that little bit more often. As things stand, Rotherham are only averaging 7.2 shots per 90, which is the fewest in the championship. Now, they have been really clinical in taking their chances so far, but if that clinical ability does diminish throughout the season, maybe those underlying numbers do catch up with them a little bit. But if they just bump things up ever so slightly, start to be a little bit more aggressive maybe in the final third, we could see a few more goals going in. With Sheffield Wednesday, it's a case of finding that little bit more creativity in their side. As things stand, they've created the lowest XG of any championship side at just 3.2 in their opening 5 matches. That is my big concern with Wednesday going forward, because I think they showed in that game against Leeds that they can grind things out defensively, but where's that consistent goal flow going to come from? Southampton, it's definitely a case of tightening things up at the back. We saw how exposed they were in that game against Sunderland, conceding 5 goals, and that could have been the tip of the iceberg from a defensive point of view for Southampton, because they do rank quite near the bottom for a fair few defensive statistics. The obvious one, obviously, is that they've conceded 12 goals so far in their opening 5 matches, which is the most of any championship club. Bazunu, from a statistical point of goals prevented, hasn't been great so far this season, but I think in general he just needs more protection from his backline and midfield, as they have been susceptible to teams breaking on them. With Stoke and Alex Neil, I do think it's a case of maybe needing that plan B, and Alex Neil figuring things out of how he can properly affect things from the bench. When the opposition have scored first against Stoke this season, Stoke have lost all of those matches, and they've also failed to score when the opposition's taken the lead as well, which is a little bit of a cause for concern there, in an area where Neil can look to brush up tactically maybe. Obviously, a lot of new players coming in, lots of turnover, it's going to take time, but that's an interesting stat that's popped up off the bat. Sunderland probably looking for a creative solution on the road. I know it's a very small sample size we're using here, but in those away matches against Preston and Coventry, I didn't feel like Sunderland really quite got out of first gear in either of those games. And it's funny because it was almost the flip side of that last season, where they came unstuck in a lot of their home matches, but we really saw the best of them on the road. Sunderland will have the chance to put these things right Sunderland will have the chance to put things right though, as their next couple of matches are on the road against QPR and Blackburn. 2 games which I think are fairly winnable if we go off Sunderland's last showing against Southampton. They've definitely set the benchmark there with that performance, but it's now about starting to pick up some more points on the road. With Swansea, defensively there are still a few questions around this side right now. As things stand, 0.47 of the shots on target they face are resulting in a goal, which is a little bit worrying. That would indicate they're giving away quite high quality chances to the opposition, because that many of their shots on target against are ended up in the back of their net. And obviously a conundrum that Michael Duff will need to solve. With Watford, I think it's finding that right balance between attack and defence. In 3 of their 5 matches so far this season, they've failed to score, but in those 2 matches where they have hit the back of the net, they put 4 goals past QPR and 3 goals past Coventry. I know that, a goal or 2 of them were gifted to them by some suspect defending at times by Coventry and QPR, but with that being said, I think there's definitely a case from an attacking perspective where they can look to sharpen things up. And finally for West Brom, I think it is a case of finding a little bit more creativity in that side. I know they put 4 goals past Middlesbrough and 3 past Swansea, but going off their underlying numbers, they've not actually been creating that many high quality chances per game as things stand. Their non-penalty XG per 90 is just 0.76, which is the 4th lowest in the league. West Brom fans, where can Carlos Corberán look to make those differences? Maybe an extra striker on the pitch? Or a tactical shift in that midfield perhaps? But guys, there we have it. That will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Just a quick one to say where I think each championship club can still look to improve ever so slightly. Do get your thoughts in the comments down below as well. But other than that guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you all in the next one.